Looting obliterates the memory of the ancient world and turns its highest artistic creations into decorations, adornments on a shelf, divorced from historical context and ultimately from all meaning. This is about grave robbing and body snatching.
Digging the dead.
Both terms are kind of beyond self-explanatory, but grave robbing is the opening of a grave, coffin, tomb, or crypt to steal valuables that were placed inside or even right off the body of the deceased. And of course, it's me. So we're also going to be doing a large coverage of body snatching, which is grave robbing of the body. We'll talk about the various gangs, resurrection men, all of the above, and of course the internet's darling mystery film that is grave robbing for morons. But of course, you know how it works here, or if you don't, make sure to subscribe so you do, and that starts with your history lesson, and the desecration of the dead has nothing but a very long-standing one. When it comes to grave robbing, China has texts dating all the way back to the 2nd century that encourages people to do more simple burials to discourage post-mortem thievery. One of the more interesting reasons of this was the use of burial shrouds made of jade. These were almost sarcophagus-esque boxes made typically in a very close-fitted shape of the individual to be buried in, or at times placed onto an effigy in the person's tomb. They were individual square panels stitched together, beautifully encasing and protecting the person buried in them. They were fairly common for wealthy individuals during the Han Dynasty, but due to grave robbers, they fell widely out of fashion, and scholars didn't even know they existed until the 1960s. And while we're in China, I know we're gonna get to body snatching in a minute, but I think it's important to mention that in 506 BC, a Chinese military general dug up the body of a king to whip his corpse. Imagine hating someone so much that post-mortem you dig them up to torture their body. As well as this, ghost marriages or post-mortem marriages were very common, and if you're like, Darby, what the fuck do you mean a ghost marriage? This was when at times a young bachelor would die, his family would find a single lady also buried, dig her up, and bury her with their son corpse and join them in death together, burying together, so marrying their now dead child unconsensually with another random individual that was dead and buried. So, you know, maybe there is love for me out there one day. Grave robbers have negatively affected history and artifacts and archaeology to a degree that is quite literally insane. And of course, one of the most large-scale victims of rampant grave robbing were the Egyptians. Noblemen literally lived with so much excess goods and foods they could be buried with them, to little or no consequences the family they left behind. While people starved in the streets, the stark class difference created a secret but common practice of tomb raiding and even theft. And this post-mortem theft would start as soon as someone was dead, really. Unwrapped mummies would show jewelry impressions left that the jewelry wasn't there because the undertaker would pocket it for themselves. West to the Nile was Valley of the Kings, where many wealthy aristocrats and royalty were buried, and those that built the tombs were commonly the ones who would ultimately end up robbing them. It's believed that within the first 100 years of sealing, most of the tombs were raided, even with documents of some being raided within hours of their sealment. Between the craftsmen of the tombs leaving small gaps that only they knew about that they could squeeze or get into, and even documentations of people digging extremely long tunnels to break into tombs, no one was safe from their things being stolen post-mortem in ancient Egypt. A confession from 1110 BCE even saying, quote, "We took our copper tools and forced a way into the pyramid of this king, though its innermost part, set fire to their coffins, and stole their furniture," unquote. This was part of the start, or at least the escalation, of curses being carved into tombs or traps put in to deter robbers that has now become a giant part of the whole mummy movie lore, but it actually does have some root in reality. Grave robbing was occurring so much they were trying to think of any means to deter people from doing this. But as mentioned, this confession and many occurrences were from the unfair societal indifference between wealth of people in ancient Egypt. Many people felt as if they had no other choice but to rob the dead of their goods just to merely survive. Humans are humans, and the entirety of robbing the rich to just sustain yourself or get by is part of the entire existence of social classes and the entire capitalism and whatever the hell you want to call it is. People will go to whatever lengths they need to survive, and grave robbing has been a long-standing one. The tomb of Tutankhamun even had evidence of robbery inside it, and to say if you got caught doing this, the punishment was light. The punishment was not light. I don't know how to say that good. I think it started with impalement. Like, I think if you got caught robbing a tomb, especially the tomb of a king, they would start with impalement. And when I say impalement, I'm talking cannibal holocaust impalement. I'm talking stick through your whole body impalement. This was a very, very serious crime. But it's the Darby Valentine channel, so let's start talking corpses and cadavers, and that takes us to body snatching, which the term and occurrence of it really started skyrocketing in the 17th century in the US, but more particularly in the UK, where they would call the men that would snatch bodies resurrectionists, which, way too sexy of a term. Don't make body snatching sound sexy. Resurrectionists? Like, how you gonna put a word with erection in it? I'm just saying. Resurrectionists and body snatching as a whole was mainly to give medical students bodies to work on. During this time, the only allowed bodies for dissection or experimental work were those of executed criminals, as we discussed in the autopsy video. So, go watch the autopsy video after this one. But as you can imagine, the demand far outweighed what was available at the time, especially with all the advancements occurring in anatomy at the time. But these body snatchers were absolutely ruthless, uncaring, and disgusting. Even in 1832, the Times wrote a report that a group of resurrectionists broke into the wake of an elderly woman held in a residential home, either her home or her neighbor's home, for family and friends to come to see her body before she was to be buried, and they just broke in and stole this old lady's body from her wake in someone's house, and apparently dragged her out through the literal mud in the streets. And where there's money to be made when committing crimes, there is gangs to be formed, and one of the biggest was the London Borough Gang. They ran for around 23 years, stealing corpses and selling them to hospitals, which was initially ran by a former hospital porter, and him and his group would supply specimens for some of the biggest anatomical schools in London. But of course, stealing the bodies of people and selling them isn't really a drama-free gig, is it? In 1816, they started to refuse sale to the St. Thomas Hospital School because they wanted about double what they were originally getting from the school for cadavers, and the school responded by hiring freelance body snatchers because, yes, there were freelance body snatchers. Of course, there were freelance body snatchers. Who knew you could be an independent contractor while stealing corpses? But, there's a job out there for someone, isn't there? So members of the gang showed up at the school, but, it's a gang. They didn't just show up at the school. They burst into the dissection room, started threatening students, and then started attacking and mutilating the corpses they had there for dissection so they were unusable, is my guess. Don't know why else they would do it, but they're also people that steal bodies for a living, so who fucking knows? And the funniest, well, I guess we have to find something funny about this because this is just literally horrific. The funniest part about this is that they were then obviously arrested for causing a giant ruckus, and the school went and bailed them out and then renegotiated their deals with them because they were more worried about it coming out of what business deal they had going on with this gang. So they essentially told this school, yo, pay us double or no corpse for you. School goes, hey, screw you, I got cheaper corpse around corner. They go, oh, crazy, show up, I attack your cheap corpse. Oh, I'm arrested, school shows up, I take you out, I give you what you want. That's essentially what it's happened in Caveman. And as I've now mentioned legal stuff, they weren't arrested for body snatching because there were no laws against body snatching in England until 1832. And even once it was deemed illegal, it was actually a lesser charge than it would have been to grave rob and steal items from said body. Which means that body snatchers that would be caught in the act, resurrectionists, instead of them continuing with stealing the body, they would just drop the body and act like they were stealing rings or jewelry or clothing off of them because it was a lesser charge to get that. So instead of being like, oh yeah, I was going to sell this corpse to the school, it was like, guy had sick cufflinks. Which, if they were caught by non-officials trying to rob a body, there would be something called resurrection riots that would take place. Once again, how many free, awesome band names do I give you guys all the time and no one's using them? Resurrection riot? Are you kidding me? Someone go use that, please. But this would happen, and these would just be people of the town. It'd be people that were sick of loved ones, families, neighbors having their bodies stolen, so they would raid around in the graveyard at night for someone to try to body snatch and kind of just start whooping their ass. And I think it's worth noting that the schools, hospitals, students, doctors, whoever is buying these bodies, they technically could be held liable in court for purchasing stolen bodies, but there's like really almost no documentation of people ever being punished for purchasing stolen bodies. It was always the person that was just stealing the body. And of course, I know why you're here. This is what the WikiHow link led you to. This is the portion of the video where I tell you how to snatch a body. I'm just kidding. This is how Resurrectionists snatch a body. Please don't snatch a body. And if you do, unsubscribe before you do it. Okay, it's not gonna look good for me. I'm just kidding. Please don't unsubscribe. I need you. When it came to Resurrectionists, they usually had a network of informants that would alert them. This could be from local nosy people to undertakers or members of the police themselves who all wanted a cut in the sale of the corpse. And I'm not kidding. These resurrectionists were hustling corpses to the point that they would freelance hire women off the street to go to workhouses and pretend to be mourning family members of recently dead people to claim their bodies just to turn around and sell them. Now, digging up and removing a corpse from a grave is definitely more than a one-man job, and this was once again typically done by a gang of resurrectionists. Opting for a wooden spade to soften the noise, they would dig down onto one end of the coffin. After this, an extremely heavy sack was placed over the lid, with only one half of the coffin being dug up. The pressure from this now heavy sack and all the soil leaning onto one side made it very easy to snap the lid in half. They would then lift the body out, sometimes with hooks, ropes, or just their bare hands. Once they started lifting the body out, they would strip them of their clothing, putting these typically back into the coffin, cover back up the hole they dug, bind the body into a sack to carry out, cover the hole back up as best as they could. They would even at times put a giant second sheet down to put all the dug up dirt on to just flip it back over. They would cover up their evidence and be gone into the night. There are resurrectionists who said they were able to accomplish this in just 30 minutes flat. There's an extremely strong preference for robbing the graves of poor people or those of color, because their graves were less likely to be guarded at night, or even just the burial means weren't as neat and tidy, so their work would go unnoticed if they didn't clean up the digging well. It is a constant piece of history that the corpses of the poor and people of color are almost always the most susceptible to be disrespected and abused during death. And as I mentioned, graves being guarded, this was a very real thing. Really rich people would have servants that were paid to stand outside their grave and make sure no one came to steal their body at night. In 1828, it was estimated that in London alone, there were around 200 resurrectionists, and this would lead to graveyard inventions. One of the most prevalent are called mort safes, and these are either steel cages, grates, or entire coatings over the outside of caskets. These are extremely prevalent around Europe. I actually saw one in Texas, which was kind of crazy. I'd never gotten to see one in real life. But these would deter people from getting in because, frankly, it would be a nightmare to get into it, so you wouldn't bother. And there's also the more cost-effective means of just putting a giant slab of stone on top of your grave that was, again, kind of just a bitch to move around in the middle of the night. But this also led to a staple of the Victorians, and that is creating insanely goofy, unnecessarily, and frankly, usually don't work trinkets, inventions of the sort against grave robbing. This included the patent coffin that had springs put into the lid to try to have them not be able to open it, which it would just spring back, in theory. Along with this is my favorite, and it is the torpedo casket. You couldn't, the Looney Tune ass Victorians, the shit they make is so goofy. The patent of the coffin torpedo said, quote, "The object of my invention is to prevent the despoiling of graves, and it consists of a torpedo placed in the grave and arranged in such a manner that it'll explode when the grave is dug up and carry destruction to the parties attempting the same," unquote. So essentially, there were a few patents for the torpedo coffin, I don't want to dog on them too much. The original one was just an explosion. It was that if you opened the lid, an explosion would happen, or they would even suggest putting the explosives into the clothing of the corpse, which, it sounds insane nowadays, but when I tell you the amount of bodies being snatched were insane. But his idea was to put explosives into the coffin, and you're like, how would that work? There is documentation that there were explosions that happened at cemeteries that seemingly were from grave robbers. So you can laugh at him all you want, but it does seem effective. Later on, I think it got, after a few patents, it got downplayed into, it would just throw debris or rocks or stuff. It'd make a kerfuffle. Like, it would be obvious someone was trying to grave rob. And of course, there were just the more simple ones. People would strap down or screw or nail down people into their caskets. They would even just not bury them with soil and instead start burying them with stones. There was a giant movement and shift around burying people just due to the fact of how many resurrectionists were around. And of course, since we're now grave robbing, body snatching, let's do a little twofer and talk about the internet's one of the most favorite internet mystery, gross, dark, weird. It's 4:30 a.m. Please give me a little slack. Grave robbing for morons. In the early days of VHS tape sharing, there was always a dark, morbid side. And there was one that became an instant popular, the early underground trading space. It was titled simply, Grave Robbing for Morons. It would eventually appear on a DVD compilation spreading its infamy, titled Ensuring Your Place in Hell. To me, this seems like quite literally a direct inspiration from Faces of Death, this entire compilation of shocking material and oogie boogie, ooh, so scary, so real. It was 4 separate short films, Grave Robbing for Morons, Mortuary of the Dead, Cooking with Huck Botko, and Exploding Varmints. Mortuary of the Dead was simply a bunch of people walking around with a bunch of open graves and stuff, and it's very, very real, obvious footage. So is Exploding Varmints. We're not doing that today. We'll do a weird shock compilation DVD mega video in a minute. Okay, so be on the lookout for that one. But it was Exploding Varmints. So, what is on the tape Grave Robbing for Morons exactly? It consists of a young man, Anthony, describing to his friend Gino, who's behind the camcorder, how to successfully peel the skin back from a skull, how to just generally rob graves, steal body parts, and prepare them for sale. The video is just about under 27 minutes, and it is so violently performative, yet disgustingly authentic. It's definitely a teenager saying things in a way to seem, cool or tough or edgy. Even, talk about before you go grave robbing, don't drink, but like maybe you should get laid before you do it. But this is all being said by Anthony, who is also holding a very real human skull, as well as subsequently holding up femurs that too appear real to make it kind of seem like a skull and crossbones. And you listen to him and it has that air of fiction, and you look at everything being presented and it becomes very real to you. But then it does get tied back, because then when he's like, oh, if you run into witnesses, knock them out, and make them think they're having a dream. There is just so much fiction spliced into this. But the biggest point of why this is possibly real is this human skull. If you watch this video, which I think it's real human bones, so if that bothers you, I probably should clips in this, so, you know what, I put a warning in the beginning of this video. There is dental implants in the skull that it keeps pulling in and out. And I don't think teenagers making a fake skull would be like, let's put dental implants in the skull. That'll make people really think it looks really real. And I would argue, I kind of know what a real human skull looks like. I would be confident to say so. And I think this is a real human skull. There's kind of no doubt in my mind that this is a real human skull in this video. Over the years, people have tried to find out who Anthony is, or if anything was ever real, to never turn anything up. There's been fingers pointed to multiple individuals just for all of them to be ruled out fairly quickly. But what can be known is the video had to have been filmed between 1989, based on the copy of the Fangoria scene in the video, and 2003, as that is the first or at least the earliest listing of the video online from the now defunct Shock video site. As for where this was filmed, Anthony quickly points to New York with his accent and the fact that they say Houdini was going to be their next target, which I didn't know Houdini was buried in Queens. I'm literally going to go to his grave this week. I did not know that. And it's worth noting that the last documentation of Houdini's grave being vandalized heavily, because there was a long-standing time of people vandalizing his grave, the most extreme one was in 1993, which would line up in the timing of when this was possibly filmed, if this is real. But that's really all there is. Like most things that capture the internet's attention, there just isn't much there. Which is why we're so drawn to it, no? That unknown factor? That's what hooks us in. As it stands, the grave robbing for morons will be another internet mystery that may never be solved. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, do all the things. And of course, I must pose a question to you. And today I would like to know, what do you think is the best way to have someone not rob your body? Are you making torpedoes? Are you putting springs? Let me know down below. Also, sorry if I have too much personality in this. It's when I tell you what time it's 4:30 in the morning and I tattooed for 10 hours today. light work. That is not a joke. So I'm a little too hammy, a little crazy. So thanks for sticking around. Once again, thanks for liking, commenting, and subscribing. If you want to be a member of the channel, the link is down below. Members get early access to videos. Also, I got the play button up. Thanks everyone for subscribing. That means a lot. But I will say, once again, 60% of the people that watch me aren't subscribed. God, subscribe. Stop being lame. Also, merch is linked down below. Make sure to follow me on all social media platforms at Darby Valentines. I'm most active on Instagram and the TikTok, so follow me there. And if you like this video, oh gosh, boy, do I think you would like my video about the history of autopsies. With that, I will see you next time. Bye!